From Rotterdam, there is two recipes or two legacies we would like to bring and share. The first one is that in Holland, which is anyhow a culture of below sea level dredging and marshes, the port development and dredging always counterparts ecological restoration and development. So they excavate and they use this beneficially for ecology. So they pay the money for ecology. So ecological restoration park projects are always at the back of the strong economy of the harbor. And of course that is also politically organized in a way, strategically, on every level, that the one cannot happen if the other doesn't work. So this is also a sort of check and balance. The second thing is that Rotterdam is, as a city with immigrants and working people, very vulnerable. On a social economic level, Rotterdam has a very bad reputation. And what we learned that projects in public space related to education, food, music, where we have a common ground, that's where people share, that these projects should be linked. And a project where parks are isolated won't work. So park and community always. So housing corporation, real estate developers, they have to work with the logic of communities, and then the park is integrated in that type of approach. So what I would like to share is a sort of long-term strategic asset. If you combine parks, urban edge, development, community building on one side, if you make a partnership between ecological restoration and port economy, then you have for a long time a good alliance. Okay, delivering that spirit, and that's what we brought, and Isaac will explain a little bit more about that. The second thing is that the community only believes this kind of strategic partnership if in the early years a few things are delivered, because otherwise you lose your confidence. Like, yeah, the politics and the strategies might work, but will we go there with our family? Will we share? Will we meet on those new spaces? So the second component of approach, and I think that is very American as well, is to deliver a few parks, new bridges and connectivity in the first terms. And we hope, and we will explain that, we hope to do that in combination with program of food, music and education. So it's not about design or architecture or here's a nice jolly thing and everyone will meet there, but you need activator, and really activator, using existing community leadership, and on these teams you have easier access for a successful project. So we brought those in as well.
Thank you, Adrian. I'll grab this. So I just want to also kind of acknowledge the other members of our team. We're Principal at Mahan Reichel Associates, Pangu from our office here, and Moffett Nickel, Rob Sloop, Doug Brooks, obviously, who's been kind of running the project for our team. And picking up on what Adrian is saying, we started really by looking back at Baltimore and kind of recognizing that there is really a successful model in Baltimore about redeveloping a harbor. It's called the Inner Harbor. It worked. It was a great thing at the time. And it has been good for Baltimore for a lot of years. It's maybe not as good as it should be for Baltimore. I think we all kind of acknowledge that today. It could be better. But we started by looking at kind of that relationship, the relationship between kind of the Inner Harbor and the Middle Branch, and looking at ways in which we could kind of remake the Middle Branch from the lessons of the past, so that we can create a version of the Middle Branch that is the best version of itself. And so one of the key kind of drivers for us, as Adrian mentioned, kind of that ties together this international kind of idea and this Rotterdam idea with Baltimore, is this idea of connecting industry, ecology, and community. So these things are not separate. But in the Inner Harbor, we pushed out, we cleansed the Inner Harbor, really, of all of the industry that was once there. We capped it, we put out a 20-foot wide kind of boardwalk, and we said, we've got ourselves a great harbor. But what you miss in that opportunity, what you miss in that moment is exactly what Adrian is describing in terms of being able to create kind of a hybrid ecology where there is industry and ecology through kind of wetlands and parks that are created out of the sediment pulled from the shipping channels. And we're at the point now here in Baltimore where that's feasible. That's technically sound. The sediment that was contaminated is now contained in facilities, technical containment facilities. And what's coming out of the harbor now is it's fairly clean material. There are the pockets where it's still kind of legacy contaminants, but by and large, this material is solid material that we can use to really kind of twin the economic engine of the city with a new ecology in the Middle Branch. And so we're looking to kind of reconnect those things in the Middle Branch. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the mechanics of that. But the other piece is that when you look back at the Inner Harbor, it is a space that really is dominated by commercial and retail interests. It's not a space that you go to if you don't want to buy a thing. If you go there and you're not buying a thing, it's kind of questionable. You have that issue down there. And the idea that is a real problem, and that this Middle Branch can find a better balance between commerce, mixed-use economic development, and simple leisure time, where you can be in the Middle Branch in these parks and open spaces that are accessible, open, inclusive. And so those are kind of some of the ideas that we wanted to link between kind of the success of the Middle Branch, but some of also its failures in terms of looking through and forward to the Middle Branch. And so the idea being that we would be using sediment dredged from the shipping channels, maintenance channel dredge material, to create a series of wetlands and ecosystems that foster an inclusive approach to open space, also creates new ecologies in this Middle Branch, also then provides opportunities for coastal resiliency, community resiliency, not kind of spot level resiliency where you have a developer who's lifting up the plinth of their building and everybody else who's not in that space gets flooded, but that by creating a complete kind of chain of wetlands throughout the Middle Branch, you can create community level resiliency where it's not the haves or the have-nots, but everybody has a degree of protection that is equitable and just. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking here. And technically, the way that we would do that is begin by kind of pinching down some of these key thresholds. And it's tough to see from a distance. And but what we're talking about is really pinching down at three kind of key points here, here, and then down over here where we're proposing a new island that I'll get to in a bit. But the idea is that you pinch down these spaces, you can create increased velocity by closing the amount of space that the water can travel, which will self-scour those channels, will open up new opportunities, new creeks, new types of wetlands that resemble more of the ecologies that you see out in the Chesapeake Bay, but that again provide a layer of recreational experiences that you don't have anywhere near here right now, but again are tied to the idea of industry, twinning industry, economy, and community in a way that is more just, more balanced than what we've had in the past with the Inner Harbor. And so some of the techniques that are available to us to do this type of work are things like geotubes, these really kind of basically there's these socks that you can kind of pump mud into. The water goes out, the mud stays in. It's a way to stabilize the material in place so you're not getting sediment flushing into places you don't want it. You can kind of then you can backfill some additional material. And it's worth taking a pause and recognizing that the Port of Baltimore has a strategic goal to reuse sediment. They actually pay a lot of money to take this material and dump it in containment facilities. So there's an economic incentive for the port to, instead of taking that money essentially and using it to bury it in a landfill away from communities, you take that same money and place it strategically using techniques that are available to us today to build wetland ecosystems. So there's a real big picture idea that we're driving to, that it twins industry, economy, and ecology and community, but that's also feasible from a financing perspective. There's a cost benefit and a co-benefits that the port can kind of support through this process, and again, kind of reinforcing the idea that it's technically feasible today. And so you take this big idea about wetland creation, twinning industry, ecology, and community, and you bring it back to connectivity across the community, so having multimodal transportation that's appropriate for pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicular uses. You're starting to really now build back and build on the lessons that we had learned from the Inner Harbor. And I'm going to pass it on to Adrian to talk a little bit more about the other kind of really big gesture that we've made here that I think is an important part of understanding the feasibility and the connectivity of the project.
Okay, let's say the early starting of the project is of course on a political level to make these larger strategic alliances. But for us is to deliver a serious bike lane and pedestrian lane implementation on Hanover Bridge and establishing the swing bridge connection. So then there is a circuit where connectivity and communities can exchange, and this is a starting point. The second very important starting element is, and focal point is the Middle Branch Park, which has pretty bad edges to the water. So the shore edge, we think, should be extended into the water and be planted at certain portions. So there is shelter and enclosure, but there could also be a large central lawn for activity, festivals, and play. We then implement on the most successful project, the boathouse, a second boathouse, a kayak club, and a boat building school or education center. And two themes, catalyzers related to food and music, which we believe is what communities will bring together. Then in the dredging, we are believing that there is a kayak creek as number one to be delivered. So the Army Corps, under pressure by politicians, will deliver that with a community group and to build the first creek as an ecosystem. We somehow believe that, and this is the almost shameless Shakespearean, the Olmstedian approach, which is making a circuit of boulevard with an interface, an urban interface. So we don't build parks naked on the water and disconnected, but the park should have a sort of hinterland. So you can philosophically ask the question, why is this area an urban development with beautiful edges and restaurants and hotels and bars and dock facilities, and why doesn't it happen here? And so we believe that like in the Olmsted days, there is a necklace of parks, there is amazing biotopes and wetlands, but the connectivity and the urban stitching, that is the key component. And that could, we double checked on land which is vacant, easily introduce new communities with all kind of demanded programs, which will make the project not 1 + 1, but is 2, but 1 + 1 is 3. One of the speculations that we think is needed is that there could be a moment in history that the restoration and the adjustments on Hanover Bridge are so expensive because maybe the piling is not good. We've seen reports which more or less speculated could be good, but it could also be going terribly wrong. There could be a moment that you easier build a new robust concrete bridge more east, and that would liberate Hanover Bridge for a linear park better than James Corner's High Line. So Baltimore will have a linear park where a spectacular world of crab eating and kayak and canoe launching under the Hanover Bridge could develop, where communities from either end will meet each other in the middle of the bay, and she becomes the landmark, silent, green, historic, in the middle of the water. There's no doubt that the community with the bars and the crab restaurants here will also participate, and then we will learn that they will reach to the other side. I will stop here. So the critical thing in the design of this is that all these sections should be developed, and that can only work with, let's say, iterative process with the communities, with the developing industry, housing corporations, and all kind of programs which we found already are here. Thank you.